Welcome to the Diversity Connector podcast, where we explore the rich tapestry of human experiences. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging, and together as we dive into conversations that bridge cultures, challenge stereotypes, and celebrate the unique perspectives each of us brings to the table. Each episode is a journey through stories and insights from a kaleidoscope of voices, each sharing their colorful narrative. Whether you're at home, on the go, or just anywhere in between, you're now part of a community that values understanding, inclusivity, and the beauty of diversity. So plug in your headphones, get comfortable, and let's connect through the power of our shared stories. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on the Diversity Connector podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Diversity Connector. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating young woman. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us today.
Hi, Gertrude. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share my story with you and your audience. I'll start by stating my full name. My name is Maryanne Oladapo. I'm based in Brisbane, and my current job is the grants coordinator for Multicultural Australia. So my role is to really develop funding strategies that drive social change, especially for our migrant communities, refugees, asylum seekers, and new arrivals to Australia. A little bit about me. I've always pretty much grown up in Brisbane, but I actually grew up in northern Queensland. And while I was growing up there, my mum used to work for a multicultural organisation, the Migrant Resource Centre in Townsville. And from a very early age, I was exposed to a variety of people from different backgrounds. I would spend my school holidays at my mum's work from time to time. And in the back of her office, she had this huge library of resources that just really opened my eyes to the diversity in our world. So there were things like books and dolls and musical instruments that, unbeknownst to me at the time, really primed my young brain to understand the complexities and the richness that's out there in the world. I then moved into, when I moved into high school, when I graduated high school, I went and did a business degree. I was really passionate about entrepreneurship. And then I ended up in the corporate sector. So I worked in the banking and finance field for a little while. But after a few years, I really wanted to use my business skills to solve bigger problems. So I was very interested in things like human rights, international security, international development, trade and investment. And I really wanted to, apply my skills to solving some of those issues. While I was studying my Masters of International Relations, I then had the opportunity to do some internships. So some of them included working for the Hunger Project, and their primary purpose is to alleviate hunger globally. I then had the opportunity to work for the University of Sydney at their Centre for International Security Studies. So in that role, I was a research assistant looking at ways that we can use quantum computing to assist in foreign relations. And the other opportunity I had, which was really exciting, was to work for the United Nations Association of Australia. So I actually started off as an intern there before getting tapped on the shoulder to run their young professionals program. So a friend and I co-founded that chapter in Queensland. And we had the primary goal of educating young professionals on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and how they could leverage the framework to inform their decision-making processes and, importantly, make a change wherever they are. So that was a very rewarding time for me. I wasn't working for a lot of money, but it was very rewarding, and it made me realize that I was in the right field. After I finished my internships, I got the opportunity to work for the Australia Pacific Business Group. So they're actually a secretariat that promotes trade and investment between Australia and our Pacific neighbours. So I was dealing with the Australia and PNG Business Council, the Australia Fiji Business Council, and the Australia Pacific Islands Business Council. And that group runs the largest bilateral business forums between Australia and the Pacific region. And it was an incredibly eye-opening experience. I then got tapped on the shoulder to work at Brisbane City Council in their international relations team. And I was doing a bit of research there, primarily for their Asia Pacific Cities and Mayors Forum. So that brings together all of the city leaders and mayors in the Asia Pacific region to Brisbane for collaboration and knowledge exchange. From there, I then got tapped on the shoulder again by someone who said, I think you'd be really good for a grants role at Multicultural Australia. And it was a great opportunity because it gave me a real insight into the high level view of how program development, how programs are developed and how they're shaped and how they make an impact in the communities that we work with. So that's pretty much my work history and a bit about me. I'll wrap it up there.
Wow, thank you so much. What a journey you've been on to get to the point you are now. But it sounds like everything you've done prior to this role has really led to the work you're doing now. So, what was the inspiration for you to pursue a career in social impact investing and grant management, and with a particular focus on diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, so it wasn't actually a career that I had had my eyes set on. It kind of, I would say, it fell in my lap a little bit. It's a combination of my business background and my postgraduate degree in international relations, and it was this really beautiful marriage and merging of all of my skills that led to this opportunity. So I'm a big believer that you go through things for a particular reason, and whatever's meant for you comes your way. And I think it was that very much that scenario. Yeah. So social impacting investing was very important to me. I had only heard little glimpses about it here and there. I didn't actually know too much about social impact investing, but when I took on this role of the grants coordinator, I delved in, I did a deep dive into this world of social impact investing and absolutely fell in love with it, because I think that businesses in collaboration with the public sector, the private sector, other non-for-profit entities, they can have a real impact on the social side of things, the social outcomes of things. And I think that if I was going to be spending the bulk of my time at work, I wanted it to be something that was meaningful. And one of the things I absolutely love about my job is that although my work is helping clients indirectly, I have the opportunity to see what we do on the front line. So, for example, I went to an airport arrival last night, and we had some new arrivals from overseas that had just come to the country. And going through that process of going to the back of the airport, getting the security pass, meeting the clients as they arrive to a brand new country. They don't speak English yet. And then working with a translator for them to fill out their custom card. And then they leave the airport and you know that their life is just beginning. And it just, there is just something so incredible about that experience. And so one of the things I love is that I can use those stories and those experiences to explain to funding bodies why it's important that they support the clients that we have.
Wow. Yeah, that must be an experience when you get them fresh off the boat, so to speak. So, how do you define diversity and inclusion in the context of your work? And why is it important in social impact investing?
Yeah, diversity inclusion, I would say that it's very much, it's more than just the cultural aspect. I'd say
Mhm.
it's the consideration of people's abilities, their gender, their cultural background, their attitudes, their beliefs. It's about creating a space where people can feel safe to be who they are.
Mhm.
And when those aspects are celebrated and welcomed, it really does add another layer of understanding that can bridge gaps between communities. So, for example, I'm based in Brisbane, but we've got an office out in Toowoomba, and we've got Indigenous youth that are learning to I guess, cooperate and bond with Yazidi youth. And you
Yeah.
can imagine the stark cultural differences, the language barriers, all of those things that can create some challenges. But the beauty of creating a space for diversity and celebrating diversity, like what our organization does, is that it really bridges those gaps. And I think it's really it sounds kind of a little bit cheesy, but there is a lot of richness, and I think that it gives you the opportunity to look at the world in a completely different way.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, can you share some effective strategies or practices that you've implemented to foster inclusivity within the organizations that you've worked with?
Yeah, that's a really good question. In terms of funding strategies, it's really about getting a deep understanding of a local context.
Mhm.
It's very important to understand, the social, the cultural, the economic dynamics at play, and then tailoring a solution to that, because there's no real cookie cutter approach in the multicultural sector. You're dealing with different communities, different stakeholders, so there is an element that needs to be flexible and adaptable to change and to adapting to different solutions, or creating flexible solutions.
Yes.
So in terms of inclusivity, I'm more on the recipient side of funds. I'm not so much a donor. So we really apply for grants that promote and really celebrate culturally and linguistically diverse communities. So,
Mhm.
for example, we'll go for a grant that might support a really large event that will display the the various communities that we have in Queensland. So, one of the largest events that we run at the moment is the Luminous Festival. And on average, we probably will have about 30,000 people that will attend that
Oh, wow.
festival. And
Mhm.
it's a real display of costumes, food, music, and through that event, we get to showcase the rich fabric of our society.
Mm.
So that's a real opportunity, and so on the recipient side, when we go for grants that allow us to deliver projects like that, that's how we build inclusivity.
Oh, I love it. And when does that event happen? Is it an annual thing? And what time of the
It
year?
Yeah, it's usually in July, and we have a lantern festival. So a lot of the
Mm.
communities will do a lantern making workshop, and they'll come together for a couple of weeks, and then they'll showcase their designs at the end of that. And we do a huge walkthrough one of the main areas in Brisbane, which is called South Bank. I think you've got one in Melbourne
Okay.
as well. But it's a huge parade that we do, and that's usually held in July. But this year it's being held in August.
Okay. So, what are some common challenges that you faced in promoting diversity and inclusion, and how have you overcome them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The challenges we faced particularly in the multicultural sector, is at the moment there's a huge cost of living crisis. There are a lot of funding constraints. So we're constantly having to assess what grants are actually worth applying for. So, for example, there are a lot of overheads that that aren't seen by the general public, but there's a lot of there's a lot of overheads that can eat into any margins that we have to deliver effective programs. So the biggest thing I would say is that actually the funding constraint, the cost of living crisis at the moment, there are a raft of competing priorities. So especially when we're dealing with ministers and any political office, they've just got so many priorities that they need to balance. So our job is to really communicate how the value of multiculturalism and what it brings to society, because at the end of the day, they are responsible to the taxpayer. So it's more than just a nice fuzzy feeling in helping the refugees out. There's a real social and economic cost and a real social economic benefit that comes from having programs and having organizations like us around.
Yeah. Wow. It's a lot of work that you don't really know about unless you're in the business.
Absolutely.
So how has your experience in international relations and multicultural affairs influenced your approach to diversity and inclusion in project management?
I would say that one of the key things that I've learned is the importance of actually taking a step back and considering all sides of the debate. There are a lot of different values that different communities and different stakeholders have. So it's very important to understand or find where the consensus is and then build on that. So that's one of the key things that I've learned. I think sometimes it's very easy for people to jump to conclusions, but in our role, we're really the storytellers that unpack what's really going on behind the scenes and explaining to a funding agency or to whoever's supporting our organization what it is that we do and the bigger implications of, various funding programs or the various implications of, our employment programs, our youth programs, our health and wellbeing programs. So it's really just telling that story in a way that creates change.
Now, in terms of stakeholder engagement, what techniques do you use to engage diverse stakeholders effectively and to ensure that their voices are heard in project planning and execution?
Yeah, so one of the things that I do in my role at Multicultural Australia is that we actually have we have a lot of community support workers and program managers that are on the front line of dealing with communities. So their job is to actually meet with local community members, local community representatives, corporate supporters that we have, the government bodies that we meet with, and they're in constant communication to understand what the needs are, what the priorities are, and what the challenges are. We then have a research and advocacy manager who takes a lot of that data and is able to sort of develop case studies and interpret that information in a really effective way. And that research and advocacy manager also delves into parliamentary inquiries or looks at research reports and gathers things both from the international context and local context to, I guess, distill what the key issues are. And then from that, they will then be able to craft some key messages that we can use in developing, I guess, responses to, say, a response criteria for a funding application. So, I'm not so much on the front line, but I work alongside program managers, the research advocacy manager, to take all of that content that they get from the field and then use that as part of our storytelling process. We've also got an executive team that plays a really important role in being visible in the community.
That's fantastic. So can you highlight a project that you've led that significantly advanced diversity and inclusion? And what were the key outcomes of that project?
Yeah, so the ones that jumps out at me is the Diverse Queensland Workforce program. So that was a $5 million grant that we were awarded to encourage our clients to engage in the workforce. And essentially that program was really about, I might need to back up a little bit, but we get a lot of skilled migrants and skilled refugees that come to Australia. But when they get to Australia, their skills aren't always recognised. And so they have to go through a bridging program. And that's not always advertised on a visa or when you've made an application to become a citizen of Australia. And so it's this huge barrier to employment. So there was a report that Deloitte did actually that was about finding ways that we can, it was about finding ways to leverage those skills a lot faster. So how do we get people into the workforce who are already highly skilled, already have the background? How do we get them to a position where they're ready to hit the ground running? And our organisation plays a really important role in identifying the correct pathways for them to be able to do that. So we were able to get some funding that really expedited that process for a lot of our clients. And that was a very rewarding piece that we did.
That must be satisfying when you come to the other side of it and it's all done, right?
Absolutely. It's very satisfying, very rewarding.
So how did your role as a national board member at the United Nations Association of Australia Young Professional Network shape your views and practices on diversity?
Yeah, I think that it really highlighted, I would say it just highlighted actually a lot of the challenges that there is in the international fora. And I alluded to it before, but there are just there's a huge hubris out there that there's a lot of competing agendas, competing values, competing priorities. And the important thing that you need to be able to do, or the important takeaway that I took was that it's how important it is to challenge my own worldview and really develop critical thinking skills when it comes to analysing information, especially analysing information from the media. There's multiple sides to a story. So taking a look at the history of things is very important. Understanding, who's pushing a particular agenda, who's on the panel of a particular program, where is that program based? Taking all of those things into consideration can help you, I think, make a better decision around things. I know that sounds very broad and a little bit abstract, but it's a key principle that I think I apply to everything, is that there is just so many different views that you need to be able to take into consideration.
So what are some of the innovative funding strategies that you've developed to support projects that drive social impact and enhance diversity?
I would say that actually when I started at our organisation, we didn't really have a grants process at all. We had multiple program managers that would see a grant and they would just apply for it, and it would land on the CEO's desk, and they've realised that this program manager X has done, the exact same application as program manager Y, and they've both been offline for a week or two, and they probably could have collaborated. So one of the things that I did was really I took about a month to really do a bit of an observation in the organisation and understand what the employment manager does, what the youth manager does, what our humanitarian settlement program does, and really get an understanding of their key drivers. And then from there, I developed a process, so a bit of a workflow, so that program managers I could sort of see what grants were available. So it was making the grants more transparent. So developing a grants watch list, so they can then contact me and say, hey, I'd like to go for this grant, and then I can respond and say, oh, that's great, so and so is also looking at the grant, would you like to collaborate, or is this something that is really relevant? So developing a workflow, cleaning up the process, and then that just has streamlined a lot of things. And now we're starting to get into a bit of a rhythm where the program managers sort of understand that before I apply for a grant, I'll liaise with Maryanne, we'll have a discussion about the grant, make sure that we're eligible to apply for it, do our due diligence, and then we can apply for the grant. So those are some of the things. I wouldn't call it innovative, but I definitely think it has been part of our continual improvement.
So looking ahead, what are your goals for advancing diversity and inclusion in your field? And what impact do you hope to achieve in the next few years?
I think in terms of, just advancing it, it would be just to continue to upskill, continue to learn about this space. I love to attend webinars and conferences and learn about best practice.
Yes.
And networking is a huge part that can never be underestimated. It's all about networking, talking to people like you, having the opportunity to spread the message and share some insights of my job with your audience and other people is really important.
That's fantastic. Now, just to go now to a personal level in terms of who you are, as a woman of color in Australia, what personal challenges have you encountered? Let's say when you were in school, now you're in the workplace, and how have you overcome them?
Yeah, I would say that I'm of a mixed background. So my mother is Filipino and my dad's Australian. And I would say that I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say that I had huge challenges. It was more that there were little things here and there, and it didn't really affect me too much. And when I say there were little things here and there could be things in the schoolyard where kids can probably try and have a little a go at you for your background, or have a little bit of a joke. But I think at that age, I saw it for what it was, and that was just maybe a bit of insecurity. So it didn't really affect me too badly. And the older I got, the more I realized it was I love being of a mixed background. I think it gives me a different way of looking at the world. I think that I'm able to relate to a lot of different people, and I love that about myself. And I encourage anyone of a mixed race or a colored background to really just embrace who you are, because it really is a huge advantage. And when you let your light shine brightly, it's very hard for people to be upset at that, if that makes sense. I think my husband is Nigerian, so when we got together, there were challenges there. We had family members kind of questioning our union, but again, it was more about his character and how confident and happy he made me feel. That really, just didn't get in the way of us being together. And we've got an 18-month-old toddler now, and we are having those conversations in the house around his identity. So we've got a little book at home, which is Everyone is Different, and we read that to him. And it's his favorite book. He will literally bring it over to us, but he loves it. So we have those conversations very early on with him. And we're very mindful of the environment that we put him in. So, sending him to a school where there's probably a bit more diversity is important to us. It's important for his confidence and self-esteem. And we want him to have an appreciation of very diverse worldviews.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because my little grandson is biracial. His father is Australian, and he's
Mhm.
at that age now. He's 3 years old, and he's like, "Gogo." Gogo means grandma. It's like,
Ah,
"Gogo, teach me your language." So I'm starting to teach him how to speak my mother tongue, which is Shona.
yeah,
And it's really important for kids to grow up with a balanced life. So
yes,
they're grounded in their own identity of who they are, being a little
yes,
cocktail of many nations. And you're
yes.
right, it's a strength and not a weakness. And I think the more we celebrate our differences, the better a world we can create as well for the future.
Absolutely. I definitely encourage people to embrace their backgrounds.
Yeah.
We have a lot of friends who just love to be part of our celebrations. So we had a Nigerian wedding, and to
Oh,
this day,
beautiful.
to this day, our guests will talk more about the Nigerian wedding than our Western wedding. They will come up and
I
say, "Oh,
love
your
it.
wedding, the Nigerian wedding was the best part of your wedding."
That is so beautiful. Maryanne, thank you so much for coming online today and sharing your story with us.
You're
It's just
welcome.
absolutely fascinating when I have the privilege of working with somebody who's actually in the space, in the trenches, making a difference to make Australia a great place to live. So thank you for your work.
Thank you so much, Gertrude. It's an absolute pleasure, and I hope to connect again soon.
And thank you to everybody who tuned in today. The Diversity Connector is a platform that brings you the stories and voices of people from all over the world. We share our stories to uplift you, energize you, inspire you, and empower you. So tune in again tomorrow when I interview yet another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world, and bye for now. That's a wrap, everybody, on today's episode of the Diversity Connector podcast. Thank you for tuning in and being part of our vibrant and global conversation. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a tapestry of diverse perspectives. Remember, every story you've heard today is a thread in the larger fabric of our shared humanity. So, as you step back into your world, carry these stories with you and let them inspire you to embrace and celebrate the rich diversity around us. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these inspiring stories with more listeners. Do follow us on social media by looking for the Diversity Connector podcast for more updates. Until then, keep connecting, keep listening, and keep celebrating the beauty of diversity. This is the Diversity Connector podcast signing off. Stay curious, stay open, and definitely